For the elimination match, we have this Protoss player in the top right, Nightmare.
Warning, philanthropist programs detected in comm server 04.
Versus the red Zerg player, DRG. Thank you, Kiwi Bulldog, for the 2 gifted subs. So this is the elimination match. Whoever loses this best of 3 is out of GSL for the season. Whoever wins faces Beyond in the decider match to see who else moves on. Now, these 2 were 2-0'd in their preliminary matches. Both of them stood apparently no chance versus their opponents. Nightmare faced Maru, GG. DRG faced Beyond, GG. Now they face each other, and I think they got a much better chance against each other. Which means they also have a worse chance against you. No, that's not how it works. I think this is a much more even match. Nightmare, I think, to me, I absolutely still think of him and his PVT because of his DT stuff. But I think his PVZ is pretty decent. DRG, I thought had better ZVT than anything else. Did not get to show it versus Beyond. So I don't know what I think about his ZVP. And I'm going to go ahead and throw out a prediction here. I actually think Nightmare might win this. That might be crazy talk. That might be totally based off of zero evidence. But I can tell you I was more impressed with how Nightmare survived after being killed versus Maru than it was with DRG. But that also has to do with the different matchups. So that's not really fair. But I think we'll get a good idea as to their respective skill levels and their comfort level against each other within the first 5 minutes. You know, the first adept even might give us a real clue. Nightmare is the type of Protoss player to not just stick only on Stargate. And he's once again not going to stick on Stargate. We have that Warp Gate on the way, unless he's trying to trick the Overlord. But I was going to say, I think I actually think of him as more a Twilight and Robo opener, which is really weird because Robo opens maybe 20% of PVZs, and that goes into the Disruptor drops, into the Colossus push. And Twilight Council, I guess, still, is like 40%, but... Okay, so he is trying to trick the Overlord. The Warp Gate was canceled. He does go for a Stargate. He also just might have changed his mind, to be honest. That is possible as well. So he is going to play a little more standard. DRG should have seen that the Warp Gate was canceled, that it was no longer blinky rotating. And is going to get a confirmation on the Stargate too, which is really great. Which is really, really great. Because, like, it just... You would have to be a little confused with the Zerg player. You'd have to give respect to either option of a Twilight Council or Robo, I guess, or Stargate until you actually saw what popped out of the whatever they were building. So he just knows 100% that it's an Oracle now. Yeah, I'd say Stargate's more than 50% too. My math was totally off for that one. Robo's 20, if that. Twilight Council's 20, I guess, as well. So no, Robo's got to be like 10. You know what? We're done. Stargate's a lot. A lot of Stargates in this matchup. And it is now just a Stargate into a regular third base. So as far as the follow-up to this, I have no real information to give you about what is more likely for Nightmare. Some, Protoss players, they still really like the Charged Little Mortal, Archon. There we go. Took me a little second. Took me a little while. Classic was displaying a lot of the follow-up dedicated Blink Stalker pressure, which I really liked. I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed Classic style over the past 2 weekends for Gamers 8. Gamers Without Borders, rather. And then we do have some of the more expansive macro-based type of Blink openers that go into a faster fourth base and then move on into Colossus and so on and so forth. So we're just kind of waiting on what those are. Those are the options. Just lay them out in front of you. Twilight Council and Forge, not really giving us too much information, but I guess with the Forge, it's not really going to be a dedicated all-in. 2 gases in the natural as well, though not mining. They should be mining. Yeah, there they go. And the game continues on. What is DRG doing, you ask? Well, he did add on an Evolution Chamber. So we are going to have that faster +1 melee. And he does start that up, which is very effective against some of the Blink Stalker openers, right? If you get enough lings, especially if you get a surround really quite devastating even. And it does go into that +2 melee that where the banelings, should they be created, would one-shot probes. And banelings should be available at some point in this EVP. Maybe not immediately, but at some point. So Nightmare's going to have to be careful. He's actually so far not been able to scout the evolution chamber. So he's not going to... You scout the evolution chamber in this place, and I honestly think that is a huge tell. It's +1 melee. If it's in a more typical place on the front, you could give a little more credit to it being +1 missile or something. But fourth hatch on the way, macro hatch as well. The macro hatch would also be a sign, of course, it's a mass ling. A couple of probes just went down to some lings being a bother, but that was just because the adepts were out of position. And there is the baneling nest. So a lot of lings on the way. Lair as well. Queen's just forwardly placed. I wonder if they were going to do something. They're not. They're not going to do anything. And now the Stalker push is on the way. Okay, so Nightmare is going to do a roboless Stalker push, which is a little dedicated. It's a little dedicated, but it's not like a 3-gas, low probe count type of push. Although he also, of course, stopped producing probes because you don't need as many. I think he could even transfer off of 1 gas and still maybe have enough to do this push, actually. But regardless, he is dedicating to this pressure, right? He's trying to get a Warp Prism or a Gateway up instead of that Warp Prism so he can skip the Robo. DRG's +1 is not quite done. There it finishes as I'm speaking. That was a beautiful stasis trap. That just kicked DRG in the nuts. That was over half of his lings caught in the stasis trap, taking away the just sheer number of them, of course, but then also the potential for the surround. But if they get unlocked, then Nightmare's the one has to be careful because he could be setting himself up for a surround. That would be really weird. He's aware of the possibility. He brings it back. Now he's going to reflexively micro. Another stasis trap helps out a little bit. It's an excellent usage of the Oracles and the Blinkstalker. Exactly what you want to do when you do a build like this. He controlled those lings, well, like a pro, but DRG also kind of fell face first into a rake with that stasis trap initially. And now he's recovering. But the recovery is very difficult. This is also kind of an abusive position. A little bit choky for the lings to first filter through. More Stalkers have joined in. They got +1. They're trying not to get surrounded. Oracles are out of juice. They're not able to help this time around, but the lings aren't quite getting the kills. The Stalker micro, pretty impressive here from Nightmare. He's lost 3 Stalkers and killed over 100 lings. I'd say that's pretty impressive. That's nice. And he might just be winning right here, right now. DRG desperately trying to spend his money. Doesn't have enough larva because he pulled the queen, so he's making more queens. His 2-1 is not going to be affecting these battles. Not anytime soon. Banelings might get some decent connections, but they're not even that effective against Stalkers, not unless they hit the heart of the army. Good split here from Nightmare is going to mitigate that damage. Sometimes that opens up the opportunity for the lings to get us around, but the problem is just the number of lings. GG. Nightmare really delivering on that build, by the way. That was really nicely done in the execution. DRG would have wanted to try and get an actual surround very early on to nip that in the bud or threaten the pylon of the gateway, and he went one direction with the lings, and they got popped by a stasis trap. So, bad start for DRG. All right. Very convincing win by Nightmare. See if it changes up for game 2. In the top right, up 1, he is Nightmare. In the bottom left, it is DRG. Nightmare executing a 3-base roboless proxy gateway Blinkstalker build very well. DRG was okay prepared for it in terms of the build that he had chosen, the units that he was trying to get, but you do need that first engagement to go much better than it did for DRG. So while that isn't the cheesiest of cheese, we wouldn't call that a cheese. It's very dedicated, but we don't even really call that an all-in. I would still say that you do have to give some credit to the fact that DRG was just a little surprised. He was caught in a position, he was caught with a terrible initial engagement, and that just snowballs. I don't know if that was truly indicative of the, who's bound to win this, right? Nightmare was so much better than DRG. He's bound to win this 2-0. Yeah, that was kind of a gotcha. But DRG is going to need to set up his initial engagements a bit better. Maybe avoid that first stasis trap. Yeah. And then it'll be much nicer. But already, just by the fact that we're on altitude is already a huge difference. There's not going to be that same type of pathway that the Protoss can abuse. The last map's 4th base, really, with it, it creates that choke when the hatchery and the wall are close together. And just because the Lings can go south of the hatchery and wrap around doesn't necessarily make it that much better. The point is they're not getting that open space to get this around. On this map, let's say that Nightmare pushes into this 3rd base, although he might push into the 4th. You do have a ramp to try and abuse, but eventually, if you want to actually hit something important, you got to go up the ramp. And I think just after that last game, DRG is going to be much more mindful of getting something prepared for it. Get his Lings already ready to go for this round over here, for instance. And if we do talk about the 4th base, again, you have to go up the ramp to actually hit something important. You could just stay here and try and be the boogeyman, but then DRG could set up much better surrounds. Once he gets over here, the Stalkers go back here. That's a lot of open space. Or again, that last map, 4th base, the hallway is a little more brutal. DRG came back to StarCraft 2 after participating in military service for not shy of 2 years. He came back in 2021, I want to say. I'm not sure. Different build opener from Nightmare this time around. He has hidden Twilight Council and a Robo in the back. DRG's Overlord would have been spotting around for the Warp Gate, but it was there's always that chance, right? The 50 gas dedication, when they can cancel it or just go for an off timing, isn't 100% confirmation on what the Protoss player is doing. But with the Warp Gate and a Stalker appearing as well, you are kind of leaning more towards a non-Stargate opener, right? And if it's non-Stargate opener, what are your options? Robo for the Disruptor thing on such a large map? I don't know. I don't think it'd be the best. Resonant Glaives, again, on such a large map? It's possible, but would it be the best? And then what is the most devastating? What is the thing that would kill you if you don't anticipate it? A Dark Shrine. So you do want to generally think about the worst possibility first, you know? And so DRG should be thinking of all those things. And then at least have a Spore Crawler at the 3rd. There's also still a chance that it's a Stargate, but he's about to find out that it's not a Stargate at all. The Stalker moved out of position. Buddy, you had one freaking job. My dude. Wow. He just saw everything. He saw everything. He saw a Dark Shrine. He knows that's got to be a fake Chrono and a fake Resonant Glaives. I do respect Nightmare for trying. It was possible that Overlord was just shy of seeing the Dark Shrine. But it wasn't. DT Blink starts up immediately. That's an interesting choice, but I guess Nightmare bringing it back, bringing it old school. That's what got him some recognition back in the day. But this should be a failure. Spores are on the way. Banelings are on the way. They're going to help against DTs or Adepts. Not really so helpful against Archons. Stalker just died by the sounds of it. But the Nightmares would have trouble building Archons. He could build one Archon, but not two, right? Yeah, he's getting DT Blink. Now he's getting Stalker Blink. So when his surprise build failed, it didn't just fail. It failed. Because at least when you do this normally and you follow up with the two Archons, you get a little bit of this or that. You get a Queen, you get a Creep Tumor, you get some Ling defense. This is nothing. DRG kind of confirming that as well. Gets a cancel in the 3rd Nexus, sees the Adepts are at home, sees the Warp Prisms at home, not bothering him. Now he gets a drone. I didn't really mention that, but that is something I think is important, jokes aside. If you guys don't know, GSL is not actually offline up until the finals, apparently. Well, I think players go offline for the round of 4, I think. But then audience isn't allowed until the actual finals. So the round of 16 and round of 8, I'm pretty sure, are both online. Oh, because the semis and the finals are the same day. Okay. Yeah, so yeah, the round of 16 and the round of 8 are going to be online, which, you know, for some players is a significant difference. Even though Korean players, above all, are going to be more used to the offline play, GSL is their second home, since they have to be there so often, it still is something different to have your very specific setup at home and not the pressure of the crowd and don't have to worry about the admin coming in and being like, oh, you didn't set that up correctly. It might be nicer for some players over others. I can't think of any particular Korean player where that would be the case, except Byun. Byun would be much better at home. DRG did just lose 3 drones to a run-by with the DTs, and I guess their blink, but that's really not a whole lot. The supplies don't look that bad, do they? They really don't look all that catastrophic, but I feel like DRG should be in a better position than he is. He did build 13 roaches, perhaps fearing a follow-up, faster follow-up. And he's staying on 63 drones, too. So if he's going to go for a big swell of army, he's going to be doing it on one of the largest maps that we have. But Nightmare, oh, choosing the wrong time to move out, my dude. Oh, no. The War Prism, you know, it's equally important job a lot of the time is scouting. Keeping track of the army. Keeping up track of how large it is, what the composition is, and where it is. Because you've got nothing else to do that. You don't have an Oracle. And Nightmare, he's not doing that right now. He's not being mindful. He's moving on to creep with the inferior army. DRG is prepping an army. He's actually making an army right now. Nightmare is like trying to move on with the game, get his gases up, get more probes. But the DTs should see the lack of drones here, and that should be an indication. That should be something. Save the DTs. We need to get back home ASAP. He did realize the shield batteries are too late. The Lings are already on top of them. DRG just going to roll on in. Immortals on the wrong side of town. Going to get taken down. Shield battery overcharge not available, or was popped and then died. Disruptor is going to get a hit, but is it enough? Doesn't look like it. Immortal's not getting the best shots possible. Constantly getting surrounded by these Lings. Nightmare just did not realize his attack was on the way until it was too late. He could have tried to buy more time on the ramp if he had known, but he scouted it when his DTs got to the 4th. That was way too late. I think his army actually could have handled this. If everything was together and he bought 10 more seconds, then his disruptors are in place, his immortals are together, his shield batteries are ready to be defended. Another disruptor, double disruptor hit, not really getting as much as it could. Yeah, Nightmare done goofed. Of course, it's a difficult choice. You do have to basically decide to be using that War Prism as a tracker and scouter, thus maybe less effective being a harasser, or you try and get more harassment done and miss the opportunity to scout the army. So it's, you can't do everything with a single unit. That's true, but because you know, if he had harassed faster, he might have been okay too. That's the funny thing. If he had just gotten these units across on the 4th base faster, he might have been like, hold on. The timing was completely off for Nightmare. He was trying to play this game out because we know he does. We saw that in his games versus Maru. He will not give up this game. But DRG's almost maxed out. He has rebuilt, well, he's built up his drone counts. Now his 4th base is saturated. And he is ready to rumble. Nightmare 70 supply down. He's got a shot. Disruptors can do anything. I believe in them. Just kidding, I don't believe in them. Nope, that ain't gonna be enough. Zerg Swarm. Rolling in, popping everything. GG. DRG takes, well, kind of almost a same-ish type of game, actually, in the second game. He did have to avoid the surprise Dark Shrine, but then it just kind of came down to inappropriate initial defense into super easy game follow-up. So tied up, 1-1. Game number 3. In the bottom right, we have DRG. In the top left, it is Nightmare. And like I said, both games having some similarities. DRG had to scout the Dark Shrine to make sure he didn't die, which is different than the first game. But it just happened that the first interaction with armies was really terrible for Nightmare. It's not that he didn't have an appropriate setup, I think, or a decent enough army, actually. It's that he was set up completely incorrectly. If he is on that ramp and he buys a little bit more time, he has everything collected. He's got the shield battery that he's protecting, and thus is also protecting him. That's a big difference. It might still be game over for Nightmare overall, because we don't know how the disruptors would hit, but it would have been a big difference. But as it was, when him out of position, it was very clearly going to go DRG's favor. Anyone could call that. Anyone could have. So what I'm trying to say is these games really aren't back and forth and who's the real skill, and it's a lot of what the strategies. Because Nightmare did have to pick and choose how to use his War Prism, and he used it for harassment, so he wasn't scouting the army, and the harassment came too late. I wouldn't say that anyone's displayed greater micro and macro than the other one. We might have Game 3 be the back and forth ZVP that we hope for, but I got a feeling it's going to be very similar. Someone's going to be slightly out of position, or bad build, counter build, something along those lines. Nightmare shades into bajillion banelings, you know how it goes. $35-minute game. Easy peasy. Easy peasy. Well, I do like to think of DRG as a mid-game player. That, again, goes back to my connecting him with ZVT. And I connect Nightmare with PVT, so maybe I just connect everything to Terran. That's possible. But I think of DRG as a mid-game player. Build them mid-game units. Even back when he was at his peak professional performance, I would say I remember a lot more of his mid-game than his late game. DRG, a GSL winner. He has won a GSL. Many moons ago, he faced a man called Genius, who was definitely not a genius. Fortunately, he doesn't know English, and he no longer plays professionally, so I can make fun of him all I want. Yeah, DRG 4-2. Back when not getting your fourth gas was the biggest brain move a Protoss could ever do. He's not getting a fourth gas! It was actually quite a fun GSL finals, because they were friends, and I believe they were on the same team. Team MVP, I think. And when DRG won his first 2 maps or something like that, he went over to Genius's booth and gave him a military jacket, telling him it's time for you to go to the military. It was pretty. It was good banter. DRG was good banter. One of the original Koreans to try and appeal to a foreign market. A little bit of history while I wait for the game to get heated. Right now it is just a Stargate opener into typical 2 Gateway 3rd Nexus. Nothing fancy. DRG has calmed down in his older years, apparently. I don't recall any time I've seen him being a little BM to anyone. I don't know when the last time I saw him type rapidly in Korean to each other. Maru and Beyond type to each other in all these online cups. Twilight Council and Forge is on the way. I guess Nightmare could try and do the exact same build as Game 1. If it's not broke, don't fix it, question mark. But that is, as I was saying after Game 1, it is kind of a build that does rely a little bit on a cheese factor, a little bit on not being scouted. You know, if you see a pylon being placed down with a Ling, that's very obviously what it's for. So you send Lings out to kill it, and there's not much that Nightmare can do. So it does depend on getting that set up and shoehorning the setup. Forcing the setup is hard if it really is scouted very quickly. But I think that's what Nightmare's doing again. He's no Robo. He should have +1 on the way. Oh, he's messing up, man. Okay, there we go. It's a little late, though. I mean, I don't mean to criticize, but that's a little late. Trying to get that perfect timing in. Just not so good. DRG is once again going for +1 melee. So it is setting up fairly similar to that first game. Not only does Nightmare have to get the pylon and gateway set up in proximity to his opponents, but he also has to abuse that type of hallway that he did in game number 1. DRG doesn't get the stasis trap. DRG doesn't get the surround. Does get a surround, sorry, or does go after the pylon and the gateway. It's, again, very different. Very different. Okay, I spoke too soon. Hold on. Hold up. JK, JK, JK. Robo's on the way. So Nightmare not going to go for that setup. Might poke and maybe convince DRG that he might be doing it, but he actually is getting a Robo and probably going to go into his gases. 2 Adepts trying to go for a little run by while the Stalkers got in position. The Lings just got to the 3rd Nexus and still saw no gases, and the army a little bit at home. Now it's going to see the Stalkers over here and the Oracles. This could just be a recall. Unfortunately, the hatchery is already so far done that the Stalkers can't snipe it. And it is just a little pokey poke. DRG, having seen no reinforcements and some army back at home, combine all that information together. Should figure it's going to go into a macro game of some sort. Yeah, and he's going to jump on top of this army. +1's not quite done. There we go. Finishes up. Still with a lot of Lings left over. It's helping tear down that shield body overcharge. But that's still a lot of Protoss units tucked into a corner with the reinforcements coming in from the offense, funnily enough. The Oracle's coming in. But the gases have been scouted. The indicators that it is going to go into the next stage of the game is here. DRG had already gotten up to 70 drones anyways, saved his 4th base, of course, and is actually really well set up to go, oh, okay, let's continue on. The next question I would have is whether Nightmare can turn this into like a Colossus push, but the answer is already here. Disruptor's out, not Colossus. So DRG, well, still would want Vipers, because ultimately I was thinking about if DRG should go into a Hive immediately or not. He is not. But Vipers would be good against both Disruptors and Colossus. DRG is just going to max out Ling Baneling Hydra and repetitively punch Nightmare in the face. I like that Nightmare is using some of the terrain. I mean, why not? Get it all set up. Six more drones. Gonna have one hell of an economy to sustain the mass Ling Baneling Hydra attack times 10 attack to the nth. Nightmare's Disruptors are going to have to hit well, which is a gamble. It doesn't always happen. I don't know, man. I do like Nightmare's Dark Shrine. I think slipping in a couple of DTs to hit DRG's 5th could be the perfect distraction. So then the Disruptors have a higher chance of hitting something juicy. But you know what? DRG clearly thinking about the recent buff to Zerg, the buff that made them unbeatable. It made the last Katowice ZVZ Finals wait. Nah, just kidding. No, but seriously, the Hydras do have a little bit of a damage point buff, which means they are basically a little more microable. If you don't want to know what damage point is, you don't have to know. They're basically a little more microable. So, that would help them, I guess. Offensively. Versus Disruptor splits, I suppose. Nightmare is not ill set up. I mean, he does have 4 bases. He is getting a lot of SimCity. He's got stasis traps. He's got DTs for Archons. He's got DTs for harassment. He's got upgrades finishing up. Nightmare has all the tools to protect himself as a Protoss player. But he's got to have some of these battles go well for him. Stalkers taking on +2 melee Lings. Surprisingly difficult. Yep, might want to run away from that one. +2 melee is a hell of a thing. It's a hell of a thing. I mean, yeah, the Stalkers have +2 attack themselves, but they are not nearly as high on that DPS, right? They're not chopping away super quickly. They're somewhat fast shooters. But Nightmare still on 4 bases, still ready to engage. He figures it's on the way. He figures it's coming. It's like, DRG, I know you're going to attack me. You're the type of guy who would attack me. But DRG is actually finally adding on this hive. Going up to the lurker den, figuring that his opportunity to kill Nightmare is not really there. The Protoss hasn't made the fatal mistake of moving out into creep, for instance. And there wasn't really a shockingly large opener from any of these Ling run-bys. So I think DRG is right. I mean, you could always hope the disruptors don't hit, the stasis traps aren't available. But I think DRG is right to go into the lurkers. And then if Nightmare now over-defends, that's his next worry. As Baneling's roly-poly on in. Disruptor looks to have gotten a pretty good shot, though. Only 3 probes died, so that was a nice handling there from Nightmare. So Nightmare's next worry is over-defending. If he stays on his side of the map too long, he's going to allow DRG to trade out whatever units he wants to make up for lurkers. And if he's on his side of the map when lurkers burrow on top of his 4th base, that's bad news. So either Nightmare wants to push out, potentially getting himself engulfed by Ling Baneling Hydra, or he wants to add on some Fleet Beacon action. And he's going to go for that Fleet Beacon, so he's going to go for the late game. So hey, 20 minutes might not be a bad call. All right, Nightmare is going to also push out, but you got to be so careful. On creep, you're going to get surrounded. DRG's got the army to set up. He hasn't made room for the lurkers quite yet. Banelings are still available. 70 of them, in fact. Disruptors accidentally go to the front lines. They're going to get popped before their shots actually hit anything. These shots not hitting anything anyways. And the Banelings hit the heart of the army. You could see DRG waited for the Banelings to get into the actual center of the Protoss army before letting them pop. And Nightmare took a terrible engagement. Terrible engagement. He was not at all prepared for the 3-prong surround from the Zerg. And that's on him, right? I mean, shit, like, there's not much else you can really do when they have that type of setup. When you have entered into this particular field, if they are prepared to go, there's not much you can do. Add on top the fact that his disruptors were pushed to the front, so they were easy to kill. And the Archon count really never all that impressive. He didn't get up to, like, 10 Archons, which he just kind of scoff at Baneling counts. DRG just going to be able to roll in, doesn't need lurkers, doesn't need hive technology at all, really. I think he could win this game based off a Remax. But he will be adding on at least a couple of Infestor Vipers. Get those abducts on the Disruptors, right? The Disruptor's not going to actually shoot. No siree. Nightmare. Yeah, his engagement's not looking so pretty. That first game, the Blink Stalker setup was great. It was great. The next 2 games, well, one was completely being out of position. The second one was... well, kind of being, like out of position, just aggressively. He walked into the trap, man. He walked right into the trap. So DRG will be able to rematch Beyond. All right, yeah. Rematch coming up for the Decider match.